Hello, welcome to Paramusic TV. I'm Johnny Long, bringing you another edition of Paramusic Mysteries. And this will be the second part of the Defeo murders that happened in Amityville, Long Island, New York. Now I'd like to take this opportunity to ask that if you enjoy what you see on this channel, please like and subscribe. I'll give you a brief recap, but for more details you can refer to part 1 of this series. And of course this story is also linked with the Amityville Horror, of which I've also done videos, and hopefully the intent is for all these to come together and build a picture of what may or may not have happened. Ronald Joseph Defeo, known to friends and family as Butch, would come into Henry's Bar, a place where he frequented, and announce to everyone inside that he had just found his parents shot to death in their bed. Patrons from the bar would follow him back to his home on 112 Ocean Avenue and find that not only were his parents dead, but so were the other members of his family. All of them had been shot, and at first everyone believed that Butch was lucky because he wasn't home. At first Ronnie would try to blame a mafia hitman by the name of Louis Fellini. But as the investigation progressed, Butch's alibi began to fall apart, and finally he told police that it all happened so fast. Once he started, he couldn't stop. He would stand trial a year later and be found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder, and was essentially given a life sentence. Now, during trial, Butch's defense team would go for the insanity defense, where of course you have to prove that during the time of the commission of a crime you can't distinguish right from wrong or reality from fantasy. However, the prosecution would argue that while Ronnie was indeed a troubled individual and needed help, that his attempts to discard evidence and create an alibi showed that he knew right from wrong, and that therefore he was not insane. And of course he would be found guilty. The story that he told during trial would be the one that would prompt George and Kathy Lutz to contact William Weber, Defeo's attorney, because elements of his story that he told at trial was eerily similar to some of the stuff that they experienced in the home. Look at the other videos on the actual haunting. But in 1993, Defeo would abandon the story told at trial and instead would blame his sister Dawn for the majority of the murders, claiming on the night in question that Dawn was angry at her parents for not letting her see her boyfriend, whom she wished to live with and move to Florida. And she decided it was time that they needed to be killed, and began trying to talk Butch into helping her do it. There were 2 other friends with them that were also complicit in this, according to him. When Butch finally relented, he went to find his rifle, gave it to Dawn, and told her it was ready to go. If she really wanted to do this, all she had to do was go upstairs and pull the trigger. And first, of course, to be shot was Ron Sr., but apparently this first shot did not kill him, and he started to get up and she shot again. This time, of course, it was fatal. This woke Louise up, and she started to reach for a gun that she had on the dresser, and again the first shot failed to kill her outright, and according to Butch, she was still moaning, and Dawn shot again. The second shot would also be fatal. One of the friends ran out of the house, and according to Butch, he followed him out, telling him that he needed to help clean up the scene. But Butch himself was leaving because he couldn't handle the situation and needed to get away for a bit. When he returned to the house, he would find that Dawn had killed the rest of the family, which was not part of the agreement. When Dawn saw him, she exclaimed, "Butch, you're not supposed to be here," and aimed the gun at him. But before she could fire, he grabbed the gun and they wrestled for it. And after hitting her and knocking her out, he shot her. Now there's evidence that we'll go into later that this may actually be true. Now that we've told this story, it's time to see where all of this seems to come from. Along with this story, we would see the emergence of Geraldine Gates. And when Butch came forward to tell the story that we just told, the bombshell was, on top of everything else, Butch and Geraldine were married at the time, and they even had a child together. However, like so many things in this entire story, not all is what it's originally told to be. Now, the claim made by Geraldine Gates and Ronald Defeo is that they had met in 1969 and were married in 1973, about a year before the murders, and that they had also had a child together, a little girl named Stephanie. More on that in a few minutes. But according to this story, the night before the murders, Ron Sr. had come to the house wanting Butch to come home, and I'm not entirely certain why they wanted Butch to come home, but of course this would lead to eventually the murders. And the fact that Don Defeo was the actual mastermind and perpetrator. Now, if taken at face value, some aspects of this story seems to possibly explain how 6 people who had bedrooms on 3 different floors, that there were possibly others in the house helping to control the chaos. And also I'll go into why it's possible that the shots weren't heard like one would think if Butch Defeo had simply gone into each room and killed the family in what had to be at least a few minutes of time of hearing gunshots. However, once again, if you start digging into the history of Geraldine Gates, you'll find that there are many things that don't add up. While it is true that during the time that Butch came forward with this story, that he and Geraldine were indeed married, but according to documents, they were married in 1989, and there's no existing documents showing that they were married in the early 70s. In fact, she was married to a man with the last name of Pisani. And according to her son, Peter Pisani, Geraldine was a practicing bigamist, and it seems that her target were men who were in prison. And according to Peter Pisani, his father seemed to help Geraldine visit these men for conjugal visits. Now, Pisani was born in 1975. His sister Stephanie was born probably around the time of the murders, but there really seems to be no indication that Defeo was a part of their lives at that point. Another person whose testimony is given as proof that Geraldine was married to Defeo at the time is Hans Holzer. Holzer, of course, was another pioneering paranormal investigator, at that time what was known as a parapsychologist. Of course, he investigated the case not quite a year after the Warrens investigated. He was asked to be part of that investigation originally, but was out of the country at the time on another case. But when he returned to the States, he did, along with one of his favorite psychics, Ethel Myers, and I will go more into that on a video I'm going to do on all the investigations done at the Amityville home. Now, again, His testimony was given in the documentaries and the books as a proof that Defeo and Geraldine were married at the time. However, in reality, Holzer's first contact with Geraldine was after the publication of his book, Murder in Amityville, which would later become Amityville 2, The Possession. And she had contacted Holzer, inquiring as to whether or not she and her family were due any royalties. Now, Holzer's response to Geraldine, according to an affidavit that he signed in 2000, was that whether her story was true or not, he was unaware of it at the time, and it was not part of the book, and therefore he didn't believe she was due any compensation. So what does all this mean? There just seems to be no proof, legally or otherwise, that they were married at that time. As for the story, which of course where Don was the actual murderer, there is one other aspect of this that needs to be looked at, and that's the fact that on Dawn Defeo's nightgown that she was wearing at the time of her death had unburned powder marks, and this is usually indicative of someone who has fired a weapon. She was also shot fairly close range. That could be explained even if she didn't shoot the gun. I've never seen any resolution over it, so we have to wonder if Dawn didn't fire some shots before her own murder. Now, this being said, what do I believe? It could be possible that Dawn was involved. And another reason why I wonder is because if this played out the way they said, Ron Sr. and Louise Defeo, the way they were killed, they didn't have a chance to retaliate or run. But across the hall from their bedroom was Allison's room. Allison was 13 at the time of her death, and she clearly would have already heard 4 shots almost right next to her. And it does appear that before her actual murder, that she might have been awake a few seconds before. But that means the rest of the family, Mark and John, and Dawn, if she were in her room at the time of the murders, that clearly would have had to have been woken up. And you would think they would at least be trying to find a place to hide, or even coming out and looking to see what the heck was going on. And there doesn't seem to be any evidence that this happened. So possibly, given their scenario, you would have 4 shots, maybe 5. And impossible, if Ron's story is true, it would mean at least there would be a pause in the gunshots. So it may not have been heard as some people would think. If Ronnie had just gone into each room, which would be a total of 8 shots in a period of time adequate for him to have killed all 6 members of the family, it makes a little more sense. However, that is not to say that Ron Defeo is innocent in any way. He clearly killed Dawn, and most likely did kill the rest of the family. We can't believe Ronald Defeo's account, being that he gave so many. So ultimately what happened? We may never know exactly, and we may never know if Dawn was actually involved in these murders. And the fact of the matter is, Butch Defeo was the last man standing, and was really the only one that could be convicted. Now, some of these things I also may cover in the next video that I'm going to make, which is going to cover the investigations, because there's many allegations that nothing much happened. But as time's gone on, and some things that I've learned since I've even started doing this video, we have to take another look at the investigations with the Warrens. I think we've covered as much of the murders as we can Thank you for watching this edition of Paramusic Mysteries. Again, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and stay tuned for more. Thank you very much.